just didn't look like he was as intense as he played. Um, I don't know. I always called him. I always thought of him as sort of the silent assassin. He's so unassuming. Comes up to the plate, kind of nice and soft, and all of a sudden, right.
George was supposed to add to Thurman's money and take him to the same level. And Thurman and I had a meeting, and I told him what I was made a comment that they turned into the straw that stirs the drink. Something was attributed to me that I did not say, that Thurman could only stir it badly.
He's a damn monster. That is the phrase on the thumbnail of this video. And it is not a quote from any player. It is a description. It is the feeling that Thurman Munson left behind in the men who had to face him. Munson was the New York Yankees catcher and captain in the 1970s. He was stocky, abrasive, and relentless. He fought Boston. He blocked the plate. He argued and he glared. Opposing players did not enjoy their day when Munson was crouched behind them, and Carlton Fisk knew that better than almost anyone in the whole sport. If you enjoy stories about players who made baseball feel this intense, use the hype feature and give this video some hype, because Munson's story is only getting started. Fisk caught for the Red Sox. Munson caught for the Yankees. Those two teams already hated each other, and these two men became the face of that hatred. In 1973, it boiled over at home plate. There was a collision. There was a brawl. Both benches emptied. Two catchers who wore the same gear and did the same job ended up rolling in the dirt while the crowd screamed. That is the version of Munson most people remember. The angry one. The one who looked like he was hunting for a fight. That version is far too small, and it misses the real reason the best players of that era found him so hard to handle. Fighting was not the problem. Plenty of players would fight. It was everything else. Munson could think. He could hit, he could catch, he could play hurt. And when the pressure rose, he got better. 7 huge names in baseball ran into that problem. A rival catcher, the most celebrated catcher in the game, a Hall of Fame third baseman who came to love him, a feared slugger, the most frightening pitcher alive, a teammate who insulted him in print, and a pitcher who trusted him more than he trusted himself. Each one saw a different piece of the same man. Put the pieces together, and the reputation makes perfect sense. Start with what Munson actually was, because the reputation did not come out of nowhere. He won the American League Rookie of the Year award in 1970. That is the first clue. He was not a slow starter who grew into the job over many seasons. He was good the moment he arrived. 6 years later, he won the American League Most Valuable Player award. Around that same time, the Yankees made him their captain. That title sounds ordinary until you hear one detail. New York had not named an official captain since Lou Gehrig. Think about how much history sits between those two names. Think about all the famous Yankees who came and went without ever being handed that job. The club gave it to a thick, blunt catcher from Ohio who had no interest in being charming. Then the winning started. New York took 3 straight American League pennants from 1976 through 1978. They won the World Series in 1977 and again in 1978. Munson was in the middle of all of it, squatting behind the plate, calling the pitches, and hitting in the heart of the order. The numbers support the attitude. His career batting average was .292. That is a strong mark for any player. For a catcher wearing heavy equipment and squatting through more than 130 games a year, it is remarkable. Then look at October. In the postseason, across 30 games, he hit .357. Most hitters get worse in the playoffs. The pitching is better, the crowds are louder, every mistake gets punished. Munson went the other direction. He also did something no catcher had ever done. He put together 4 straight seasons with at least 180 hits. Not one hot year. 4 in a row, while taking foul balls off his hands and collisions off his body. There is another number that sits underneath that one. Across a full 162-game season, his career rate was 176 hits. That is a hitter's workload, carried by a man who spent every one of those games squatting in the dirt before he ever picked up a bat. One historical study of catchers ranks him 3rd all-time in wins above replacement per 162 games. Only Mickey Cochran and Johnny Bench are ahead of him. Both are in the Hall of Fame, and here is the number that explains the kind of teammate he was. That same research lists Munson with a complete game caught rate of 92.4%, the highest figure in history for a catcher. When he was back there, pitchers finished what they started. Put all of that together and you reach a simple point. Munson was not frightening because he looked frightening. He was frightening because the results kept proving the attitude was real. The glare was backed by hits. The arguing was backed by wins. The refusal to give up home plate was backed by championships. That is a hard thing for an opponent to live with. You can ignore a loud player who cannot play. You cannot ignore a loud player who keeps beating you. One man had to live with it more than anybody. Carlton Fisk and Thurman Munson were built to be each other's problem. Same position, same division, same era. Fisk was the pride of Boston. Munson was the heart of New York. Every time the Red Sox and the Yankees met, the two catchers were on the field at the same time, watching each other work, hearing the same crowd, and chasing the same pennant. The rivalry between those two clubs was already ugly. Fisk and Munson became the center of it. The feud did not live in the front office or in the newspapers alone. It lived at home plate, where both men made their living. In 1973, it turned physical. A play at the plate ended in a collision, and the collision ended in a bench-clearing brawl. That single afternoon told the whole story of the rivalry. Two catchers, one piece of ground, neither one willing to step aside. If that were all there was, this would be a simple story about two angry men. It is not. Fisk noticed something about Munson that went beyond temper. He described a competitor with no natural off switch. Think about what that phrase really means. Most players have a setting they drop into when the day gets long. A hot afternoon in July against a team going nowhere. A blowout. A meaningless inning. Human beings ease off. It is normal. It is how you survive a season that runs for months. Fisk saw a man who did not seem to have that setting. Munson burned hot and fast, and Fisk described that fire as something that might eventually consume him. That was not a compliment about hustle. It was an observation about a man operating outside the normal limits of what a body and a mind can carry. Now think about that from the other dugout. You cannot wait him out. You cannot hope he loses interest. You cannot catch him on a soft day, because the soft day never seems to arrive. Then Munson stepped into the batter's box, and Fisk had a second problem. Fisk admitted something that should stop you for a moment. Of all the hitters in that Yankees lineup, none frightened him more than Munson. That is a strange thing for a catcher to say. Fisk knew what great hitters looked like. He crouched behind them all day. He studied their feet and their hands and their eyes. He built pitch sequences to beat them, and the one who worried him most was the man wearing the same equipment on the other side. Fisk gave his reasons. The swing was compact. There was no long loop in it. A short swing is harder to beat with velocity because the bat gets to the ball on time. He would not chase bad pitches in important moments. That is the part that ruins a catcher's plan. The normal way to get a dangerous hitter out is to tempt him. You show him something close to the strike zone but not quite in it, and you wait for him to swing at it anyway. Munson refused. In the moments where the game was decided, he made you throw a strike. He narrowed his focus under pressure. Most hitters do the opposite. The bigger the moment, the more the mind wanders. Runners on base, crowd noise, a manager watching, a season on the line. Munson shrank all of that down to one pitch, and his mindset in those moments was pure clutch. He did not want to be somewhere else. Put those pieces together, and you have a hitter who becomes harder to get out at exactly the moment when you most need an out. There is a good way to describe what that felt like from the other side. Every plate appearance turned into an ordeal for the pitcher and the catcher working against him. Not a single scary pitch. A long, grinding fight that cost you something even when you finally got him out. That is a hidden tax. Pitch counts climb. Good ideas run out. A staff that has to empty itself against one hitter has less left for the three men waiting behind him. Munson could damage an inning without ever putting the ball in play. And this was not a side story inside the Yankees and Red Sox feud. It was the engine of it. Two catchers, two leaders, both stubborn, both stationed at the busiest patch of ground on the field. Fisk understood that better than almost anyone, because Fisk did the same job. He knew what a catcher whispers to himself when the wrong hitter walks up with two men on. He knew the little tricks that work on most people. None of them worked reliably on Munson. So the rivalry moved from physical to psychological. It started as a collision in the dirt. It became a puzzle Fisk could not solve. And Fisk was not the only great catcher watching Munson closely. The 1970s belonged to catchers. Three men stood above the rest. Johnny Bench in the National League, Carlton Fisk and Thurman Munson in the American League. Bench was the standard. He was the name people reached for when they wanted to describe the perfect modern catcher. Power at the plate, grace behind it, a throwing arm that turned running into a bad idea. Munson was measured against that standard constantly. Reporters did it, fans did it. It followed him everywhere and he hated it. Some of it was never really about baseball. Bench and Fisk had the classic athletic build people expected from a star. Munson did not. He was stocky. He was abrasive. He was relentlessly practical about the job. Writers reached for the same idea again and again, calling him the meat and potatoes answer to two polished stars. That description was meant as a compliment, roughly. It still put him one step below the other two, and it kept doing it season after season. The comparison hit its loudest point in the 1976 World Series, when the Yankees met Bench's Cincinnati Reds. The series was a disaster for New York. Cincinnati swept it. But watch what Munson did inside that defeat. He batted .240 York, .529 in the World Series. Read that again. His team lost 4 straight games to one of the greatest lineups ever assembled, and Munson kept hitting. Against the best pitching, on the biggest stage, in a series his club never led, he was close to unstoppable at the plate. That detail separates him from a player with a reputation for toughness. Toughness that produces nothing is just noise. Munson's toughness kept producing while everything around him fell apart. Then came the moment that made it personal. After the series, Reds manager Sparky Anderson told reporters that you should never embarrass a player by comparing him to Johnny Bench. Munson was standing in the wreckage of a sweep, having just hit .529, and that is what he heard. It made him furious. It also hardened him. Bench, though, held real respect for what Munson gave his team. Not the noise, the output. Look at what the record shows. Munson ranks 3rd all-time among catchers in wins above replacement per 162 games, behind only Mickey Cochran and Bench himself. He was also the first catcher in Major League history to record 4 consecutive seasons of 180 hits or more. Those two facts sit at opposite ends of the argument, and both belong to him. One says his value per season was among the greatest ever at the position. The other says he did the daily grinding work more often than any catcher before him. Bench understood the difference between his own game and Munson's. Bench's fame came from power and from defensive elegance. Munson's value came from a different place. High batting averages, excellent game calling, and a body that kept going through serious wear. That last one deserves a moment. Munson caught more than 130 games a year in heavy equipment. He did it with bad knees, damaged hands, and a back that never got a proper rest. And he did it without complaining about any of it. A catcher's body is a running argument between what the job needs and what a man can survive. Most players settle that argument by sitting down. Munson kept catching. None of this is an attempt to declare Munson better than Bench. It is something more interesting than a ranking. Even the man who defined the position could not wave Munson away. The production was too steady, and it kept arriving in the games that decided things. Fisk saw the intensity. Bench saw the numbers. The next man saw something that does not appear in a box score. Between 1976 and 1980, the Yankees and the Kansas City Royals met in 4 American League Championship Series. 4 times, in 5 years, one of those teams ended the other team's season. That does things to people. George Brett described the feeling between the two clubs as pure hatred, not rivalry, not tension, hatred. Keep that in mind, because it makes what happened next much bigger. Game 5 of the 1977 Elks. The season on the line. Brett hit a triple and came into third base hard. The slide set off Yankees third baseman Greg Nettles, and the two of them went at it. Within seconds, both benches emptied and the field turned into a pile of bodies. Brett was on the ground. In a brawl, that is the worst place to be. Fights like that are not organized. Players arrive late, angry, and unable to see who is who. A man lying in the middle of it can get hit by somebody who has no idea what started the fight. Munson came sprinting from behind the plate. He was the catcher for the team Brett had just slid into. He was the captain of the club trying to end Kansas City's year. Every reason in the world said he should join the pile. Instead, he threw himself over Brett. He covered Brett's head with his catcher's mitt. Then he told him not to worry, because he was not going to let anybody take a cheap shot at him while he was down. Sit with that image. The most competitive man on the field, in the middle of the most hostile series in baseball, using his own body and his own glove to protect an opponent. That moment changed everything for Brett. The man he had feared as a competitor became a personal hero. Not a respected rival, a hero. This is where the title of this video starts to turn. Brett already knew Munson was dangerous. He knew the complete skill set. He knew what it felt like to face a Yankees team with Munson running it. What he learned in that pile was that the danger had rules. That matters more than it sounds. An opponent who is simply out of control is frightening in a shallow way. You can plan around him. You can wait for him to cross a line and cost his team something. An opponent who is fierce and disciplined at the same time is a much harder problem. Munson could hate losing without losing himself. His aggression had a code attached to it, and the code did not switch off when the fists started flying. Brett saw that his fiercest competitor was also completely straight with the game and the people in it. Baseball has always run on unwritten rules. Nobody prints them, nobody signs them. Players learn them by watching who follows them and who does not, and a bench-clearing brawl is the exact place where those rules usually collapse. Everything is noise and adrenaline. Nobody would have blamed a Yankee for looking after Yankees. Munson enforced the code instead, in the one moment when he had every excuse not to. He decided that a man on the ground was a man on the ground, and that being on the other side did not change it. Brett was young then. He was in the middle of a series built on real hostility, and the captain of the other team chose to protect him. You do not forget something like that. You also do not stop competing because of it. The next season they were back trying to end each other's year. Think about what that does to the idea of intimidation. When you know a man will not cheat you, and you still cannot beat him, you are left with only one explanation. He is simply better prepared than you are. Munson had shown Brett that he could read a situation instantly and act on it, even in chaos. Even when the selfish move was to do nothing at all. That same reading ability worked on every single pitch. One Boston slugger spent years trying to get around it. Jim Rice was one of the most feared hitters of his generation, and he played for the Red Sox at the peak of the rivalry. He saw Munson constantly. What Rice noticed was not the temper, it was the mind. Munson ran a game like a coach who happened to be crouching. He was not just receiving pitches, he was managing the whole thing, quietly, one hitter at a time. He studied stances, he studied eye movement, he watched for small balance changes, the tiny shifts in weight that tell you a hitter is guessing, or cheating, or leaning toward one part of the plate. Most of that is invisible from the stands. It is not invisible from 3 feet away. The best way to picture him is as a defensive coordinator who happened to wear shin guards. He used his spot behind the plate to work on a hitter's habits, break up his timing, and guard the base paths with his own body. 3 separate jobs, all running at once, on every pitch of a long season. Hitters are creatures of habit whether they admit it or not. A batter has a comfortable count, a favorite location, a pitch he cannot leave alone. Munson collected those habits the way other people collect receipts, and he saved them for later. Rice understood the real situation. Standing in that batter's box, he was not only facing the pitcher's arm, he was facing Munson's plan. Munson built pitch sequences around what kind of hitter he was dealing with. A patient hitter got treated one way, an aggressive hitter got treated another. If a man liked to wait, Munson could get ahead in the count and then make him swing at something he did not want. If a man liked to attack early, Munson could give him something that looked good and finished bad. And he rarely called the same pattern twice in the same game. That last detail is the killer. Hitters survive by finding a rhythm. You take an at-bat, you learn something, and you carry it into the next one. If the catcher keeps changing the shape of the attack, you never get to use what you learned. Every trip to the plate starts from 0. That is what it meant to face a Munson-led pitching staff. The pitcher threw the ball. Munson set the trap. But the mind was only half of it, and Rice found out about the other half in July 1979. Rice hit a ball that looked like an inside-the-park home run. That is one of the hardest plays in baseball to stop. The ball is loose in the outfield, the runner is at full speed, and the throw has to be perfect from a long way out. Rice rounded the bases and headed for home, and there was Munson. Munson went low and dove to make the tag, and Rice was cut down at the plate. Think about the courage in that. A large, powerful man is running straight at you at full pace, and your response is to get lower and closer rather than further away. That is the full picture in one play. Munson could plan the whole thing from behind the mask, then put his body on the ground to finish it. The strategist and the enforcer were the same person. So opposing hitters had to solve his thinking. But there was another question waiting. Could anybody scare Munson? One man had scared nearly everybody else. Nolan Ryan threw as hard as anyone who has ever pitched, and his curveball fell off the table. Through the 1970s, he made hitters look foolish, and he made a lot of them look frightened. Grown men backed out of the box against him. That was normal. That was the reasonable response. And it was reasonable. A pitcher throwing that hard, with a curveball that steep, is not only difficult to hit, he is dangerous. Hitters spent the 1970s bailing out against him, and most of them would tell you they had good reasons. Munson did not do it. He was not impressed by velocity, and he joked about how sensitive the league had become about it. He once remarked that everyone was so touchy, you would think Nolan Ryan was pitching. That line tells you exactly how his mind worked. The rest of baseball treated extreme speed as a special event. Munson treated it as a pitch that still had to be located. His method was simple, which is why it worked. He stayed in the box. He shortened his stroke. He covered the plate. And he made Ryan hit exact spots. Every part of that is a decision to take something away from the pitcher. Staying in means the inside of the plate still belongs to you. Shortening the swing means the fastball is no longer too quick to reach. Covering the plate means the pitcher cannot live on the outside corner. Forcing exact locations means the pitcher gets no free strikes just because the radar reading is high. A pitcher like Ryan wins twice. He wins with the arm, and he wins with the fear that arrives before he throws. That second win is free. It costs nothing, and it does half the work, because a hitter who has already decided he is in trouble will get himself out. Munson refused to hand it over. He made Ryan earn every single out with an actual pitch in an actual location. That is why Ryan respected him. Not because Munson beat him every time. Nobody beat Ryan every time, because Munson would not give ground for nothing. There is a wider lesson buried in that section of the story. Intimidation only works when the other man agrees to be intimidated. Munson never signed up for that agreement, in either direction. He did not expect it to work on him, and he never seemed to need it to work for him. Now flip the view. Everything that made Munson difficult for opposing pitchers made him precious to his own. Behind the plate, his calm sent a message to the man on the mound. It said that big velocity is not magic. It said that a hitter can be beaten with smart location and a clear plan, and that panic is the only thing you truly have to avoid. That is a valuable thing for a young pitcher to be told without words, in the middle of an inning, by somebody he believes. Yankee pitchers did not fear Munson. They leaned on him. But before we get to the pitcher who leaned hardest, there is something else Munson had to control. His own clubhouse was on fire. The Yankees of that era were not a calm workplace. They were loud, unstable, and famous for it. George Steinbrenner owned the team and did not stay quiet. Billy Martin managed it and did not stay calm. Big names arrived with big contracts and bigger opinions. Reporters filled notebooks every day. Holding a room like that together takes more than talent. It takes authority. Munson's authority came from a strange place. He was not a speech maker. He did not stand on a chair before games and tell everyone what the season meant. His leadership was physical, and everyone in that clubhouse could see it every single day. They watched him strap on the gear when his knees were finished. They watched him hit with hands that had been beaten up by foul tips. They watched him catch again the next afternoon. That does something to a room. If the captain is playing through real pain, nobody else can build much of a case for taking a day off over something minor. He never asked a teammate to work harder than he was working himself, and that is why the demand landed instead of causing a fight. Then Reggie Jackson arrived ahead of the 1977 season, and the temperature went up again. An interview in Sport magazine quoted Jackson calling himself the straw that stirs the drink, and saying that Munson could only stir it bad. That is a public insult aimed at the captain of the team, printed for everyone to read. Understand the setting. This was a Yankees squad that had just won a pennant. The captain was the reigning most valuable player of the American League. Now a new arrival was in a national magazine explaining the pecking order and putting himself at the top of it. The coverage that followed threatened to split the clubhouse in two. A team full of strong personalities now had a reason to pick sides. It would be easy to make Jackson the villain of this story. That is not the interesting part. What Munson did next is start with a fact most people do not know. Munson had encouraged Steinbrenner to sign Jackson in the first place. He saw the talent. He knew what a hitter like that could do for a lineup in October. So the man who pushed for the signing got mocked in print by the player he helped bring in. His response was not what the reputation would predict. There was no campaign. There was no attempt to run Jackson out of town. Munson kept his focus on winning. He held his standards on the field. He expected Jackson to produce, and he said so with the level of directness you would expect. Then he got on with the job. The personal grievance did not get to be more important than the team's goal. That was the decision, and it was made by the man who had the most reason to make the opposite one. Now think about why that would impress a superstar. Jackson had been around long enough to know how these things usually go. Insulted stars normally protect their pride. They freeze people out. They make sure everyone knows who was wrong. Munson did the harder thing. He acted like the season mattered more than he did. By late 1977, with the Yankees driving toward a World Series title, Jackson had come to see it clearly. He came to view Munson as the undisputed leader, the man who held that volatile roster together. That is the payoff of the whole conflict. Munson did not earn authority by asking to be liked. He did not earn it by winning arguments. He earned it because everybody in that room knew exactly what standard he would demand from himself first, and knew he would not lower it for anyone. That kind of leadership is visible. Everyone in the stadium could see it. There was another kind that only one man could fully understand, and he was standing 60 feet away with the ball in his hand. In 1978, Ron Guidry put together one of the greatest pitching seasons the game has ever seen. He went 25-3. His earned run average was 1.74. He struck out 248 batters. It was a Cy Young campaign, and it carried a Yankees team through a summer that could easily have fallen apart. Take those numbers slowly, because they are easy to skip past. A 25-3 record means he took the ball around 30 times, and his team essentially never lost when he did. A 1.74 earned run average means the opposition scored fewer than 2 runs in a normal night's work against him. The 248 strikeouts mean he was not surviving on luck or soft contact. He was beating hitters outright. A season like that usually belongs entirely to the pitcher. Guidry did not see it that way. Guidry did not treat that season as a personal achievement. He credited Munson. He pointed to the game calling. He pointed to the preparation. He pointed to the way Munson handled him mentally through the long grind of a season. But the strongest evidence is not something Guidry said. It is something he did not do. He almost never shook off a sign. You have to understand how unusual that is. A pitcher on the mound is alone. He is the one who has to throw it. Most pitchers, especially great ones, want the final say. They shake off signs constantly because they trust the feeling in their own hand more than anything else. Guidry gave that up, night after night. In the biggest games of his life, he threw what Munson asked for. That is not laziness. That is a conclusion. Guidry had decided that Munson could see the fight better than he could see it himself. And Munson could. From behind the plate, you see the hitter's feet, his hands, his eyes, and his weight. You see the umpire's zone. You see the whole board at once. Munson used all of it. He knew when to walk to the mound, simply to slow the world down. A crowd is loud, a rally is building, and sometimes the most useful thing anybody can do is take 30 seconds away from the other team. He also knew when Guidry needed calming and when Guidry needed challenging. That is a completely different judgment and a much harder one to get right. Say the wrong one at the wrong moment, and you either wind up a pitcher who is already too tight, or you go soft on one who needed a push. He read hitters through the game and adjusted as it went. He also adjusted to his own pitcher. Guidry's slider did not behave the same way every night. Some evenings it was sharp. Some evenings it was flat. Munson worked out which version had turned up, then built the plan around that version instead of the one he wished he had, and much of the work happened before anyone threw a pitch. Guidry felt that Munson's preparation gave the Yankees an edge from the very first batter of the game. Read that back and think about what it describes. A coach on the field. A man running the most important conversation in baseball, holding it silently with his fingers. Now the 7 pieces fit together. Fisk saw the intensity that never switched off. Bench saw the production that would not stop. Brett saw the character underneath the fight. Rice saw the intelligence behind the mask. Ryan saw a hitter who would not be scared. Jackson saw the leadership that held chaos together. Guidry saw the control that made a great pitcher stop arguing. No single piece explains the reputation. All 7 together do. On August 2nd, 1979, Thurman Munson died in a private plane crash. He was 32 years old. The sport stopped. His death shocked Major League Baseball and changed the Yankees organization in ways that went far past a lineup card. The grief that followed showed how deep his mark had been on friends, teammates, and rivals alike. He was 32. He was the captain of the reigning world champions. He had played his last game without anybody knowing it was his last game. It is worth pausing on one word in all of that. Rivals. The men who spoke most powerfully about him afterwards included the ones who had spent years trying to beat him. Fisk, Bench, Brett, Ryan, Jackson. These were not people who owed him kindness. They had all seen him up close, and they all knew exactly what they had been dealing with. That brings us back to the title, and to the word terrified. By now it should mean something richer than fear of a fight. Opponents were dealing with the at-bat he would not give away. The pitch sequence he had already planned 3 hitters earlier. The plate he would not surrender even with a runner bearing down on him. The pressure that seemed to improve him instead of breaking him. The captain who could make an entire team raise its standard because he refused to lower his own. That is a long list of problems for one player to create. He was not feared because he tried to look frightening. He was feared because he was complete, sharp in the mind, hard in the body, sound behind the plate, and remarkably clutch when the game was on the line. Munson changed what the modern catcher and captain could be. He proved that leadership does not need polish or charm or a good quote. It needs a total commitment to winning, a willingness to defend your teammates without hesitation, and a refusal to submit to pressure. Today, his locker sits empty in the New York Yankees Museum. Nothing in it. Nobody assigned to it. It has stood there for decades as a permanent tribute to a competitor whose intensity set the standard for an era. That empty locker says something the rest of the sport had to learn the hard way. Munson never had to tell baseball how tough he was. The greatest players of his time worked it out for themselves.